resegregate the black children, that's when the school districts finally opened up. It was special ed that finally integrated the schools because they allowed them to give money to schools for resegregating in the name of LD.
Wow, wow. And then around that same time, then that's when learning disability was created. Because at first they tried to segregate it based upon gifted students and non-gifted students, but a lot of the white students didn't test high enough to be classified as gifted. So then they created learning disability. Wow.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So the mental gifted movement, as you just stated, started in 1954, or it was reintroduced because prior to 54, you had David Wechsler, who was actually the developer of the most popular intelligence test that we use, the Wechsler Intelligence Scale, who was a racist and a staunch eugenicist. He's actually considered the father of the gifted movement. And because he thought black folk were basically inferior to white folk, obviously he didn't waste his time studying giftedness in black children. But the gifted movement resurfaced after Wechsler in the form of Mary Stallings-Worth, who was the founder of the modern gifted movement in 54, which sought to resegregate based on race. But as you said, it didn't work because a lot of white children are simply just not that smart. So in 63, the same year as the Civil Rights Bill was being pushed through Congress, a Chicago psychologist invented the learning disability, and that became the weapon of choice in the school segregation war.
And this is just something they just pulled out of thin air. It wasn't like a scientific.
Pulled it out of thin air. Now, I will say this. There are children who do have learning problems that I admit would rise to the level of a learning disability. I will admit that. For example, some children are neurologically impaired, so they would, without question, have a learning disability. We're not arguing that no children have learning disabilities. We are arguing the method through which that determination is made. Because since the method through which the determination of a learning disability is made is faulty, it is frequently leading to misdiagnoses. For example, there's no test that can tell me conclusively whether or not your son is learning disabled. There's no test. Now, neurologically, there's tests that you can use to prove whether or not there's something wrong within the brain process. But when children are evaluated for special ed, there's no CAT scan used. There's no MRI. There's no PET scan. There's no X-ray. There's none of that. It is simply a professional opinion that the white school psychologist makes based on how that child performed on those tests. But still worse, the reason why so many children are being misdiagnosed is simply because they are behind grade level. So the white psychologist is making the assumption. The learning disability diagnosis is based on an assumption that the reason you are delayed in your reading skill, or the reason you are delayed in your math skill, or the reason you are delayed in your writing skill is because you have a learning disability. But it is an assumption. The truth of the matter is most of our children, and particularly our boys, who are delayed in a skill are delayed because they ain't never been the hell taught. The school created the learning disability through miseducation. It is a structurally imposed disorder. So black boys are being what? Given double jeopardy. First, I'm being miseducated from kindergarten through fourth grade, and then they want to special educate me from 5th through 8th and say I'm the reason why I'm not learning, that is something wrong with my brain, when they know damn well it's because these white women never decided to teach me at all.
Right. Wow. And you know, I can understand. And see, I'm the son of an educator. My mother has been teaching, 45 years. I think it is, maybe 46. So I can definitely understand that. Luckily, you know, most of my teachers growing up looked like me, you know, luckily, and I was able to make it through. Part of the reason why is because my mother was an educator, and she set, you know, high standards and goals for me, and then my father reinforced them, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I definitely understand that, brother. And then from doing, I know you're familiar with Dr. Jawad Jufu, aren't you?
Oh, certainly. I was with him at the Black Star Conference on educating black boys a few months ago in Chicago. We presented together at the same conference.
Okay, yeah, because I've been, following that brother and reading about him, man, since I was in college back in the early 90s. But I know there was a recent article, February 8, 2011, from NewsWireHouston.com. And if I remember correctly, it was also on News1.com, but it's talking about how only 12% of African-American boys are on grade level. And if I remember correctly, that's reading at grade level, if I remember correctly, from that. So now, let me ask you this, brother. I know you've talked about the psychotropic drugs, okay? Before we delve into the harmful effects of them, can you explain to people briefly what are psychotropic drugs and what are they supposed to correct?
A psychotropic drug is a chemically reactive substance that someone consumes, which will impact, disrupt, disturb, or damage the functioning of the brain to bring about a desired result. For example, when a child is hyper or inattentive, when a child is angry or aggressive, that is a natural behavior that results as a relation to his emotions and his thoughts. So you have your thought, which generates an emotion. That emotion influences your behavior. And as a result of that, you behave a certain way. So if you want to change the behavior, deal with the thoughts and deal with the emotions that are leading to the behavior. When you use drugs, you bypass working on thoughts and behaviors, and you simply interrupt the natural process of the brain that leads to the aggression. So basically, you disturb the relationship between thoughts, emotions, and behaviors by interfering, by causing interference between the neurological activity of the brain that goes from thought to feeling to behavior, and you insert a drug which prevents the neuron of the thought from effectively interacting with the next neuron that's going to deal with the emotion, and which prevents that from effectively interacting with the next neuron that's going to generate behavior. So basically, every time a child is given a psychotropic drug, brain damage is taking place. It's at a minimal level, but it's brain damage. Anytime you interrupt or disturb the natural chemical process of the brain, you are engaging in deliberate brain damage. And every time one of our sons are given one of those pills, then their parents are consenting to, although many ignorantly and unknowingly, they are consenting to brain damaging their own child. Whenever you interrupt the brain's process, that is brain damage.
Wow. So anytime a child takes one of these psychotropic drugs, whether male or female, anytime a child takes one of these psychotropic drugs, brain damage occurs.
Brain damage occurs. Now it's at a finite level, a little bit of brain damage. But what happens is your son takes that drug not one time. He'll take it for a year, 2 years, 3 years. So you have a cumulative effect of the brain damage. So all those little brain disturbances add up into one big side effect. And some of those side effects include stroke, heart attack, epilepsy, diabetes, schizophrenia, tic disorders, eating dysfunction, sleep dysfunction, and most importantly, from a eugenics standpoint, sexual dysfunction. One of the side effects of psychiatric medicine is that it can impair the man's ability to control his ejaculation to the point where you're walking around not even thinking about sex, and all of a sudden you got semen running down your leg, or you're having an erection and you're not even thinking about sex. What am I doing with an erection? And I'm staying erect for hours at a time, not knowing where the stimulus for the erection is coming from, because I'm not thinking about sex, and I ain't even seen no beautiful woman. So why is my penis so hard, and why is it staying hard for 2 and 3 hours? It's because the chemical has induced a degree of brain damage.
That's priapism, isn't it? That disorder, priapism, I think is what it's called, when the penis stays erect like that. That's one of the side effects of Cialis and Viagra. Priapism. And then also, now you also talk about how the psychotropic drugs, also another disorder, another side effects.